2023 has been possibly one of the most stacked years for film, with Barbie and Oppenheimer proving there is still such a thing as summer blockbusters, with Across the Spider-Verse pushing the envelope of what animated movies can do, with Killers of the Flower Moon showing films can still be made like they used to, and Napoleon showing us, With the year coming to the end, it was time for me to start writing my list for all the films I've seen. Rankings, the winners and the losers, the best acted, best shot, best directed. Even after my video on Napoleon, I wondered to myself what film I'd watch and review next. But to my surprise, it was neither a film that had been marketed to me, nor a film I had prior interest in. It was a film on a budget 5 times smaller compared to most films made today. A film about a simple story of humans fighting a monster that threatened the world. However, after seeing tweets of the Rotten Tomatoes score, the near universal resounding praise for this picture, I had to see it with my own 2 eyes. But would it even be in a theatre near me? I looked around and found a showing only 16 miles away, and so it was on a cold Tuesday night that I finally sat down and watched Godzilla -1, and it might just be the best film of the year. When we talk about the end of World War II, we always focus on the bomb and the effect it's had on civilization, the terror it caused then and the fear it still causes us now. Even though it was detonated 79 years ago, that detonation is still felt now, plunging the world into a new age where conventional war could no longer be fought. What we don't hear about though is the reconstruction of the world, the effort put in by the average person to return crumbled buildings into new sites of engineering marvel, to turn small cities into now sprawling metropolises. Specifically, what is never talked about is the rebuilding of Japan. Whilst it was a country that was nuked, it was the country that through the next 20 years rebuilt itself to almost become the most dominant power in the world. So to set a movie in that point of time, to see the destruction, the wasteland that was Tokyo, and the people living in that wasteland, is both eerie yet fascinating. Such is the same for the main character of the film, Koichi. Koichi is a man who has not yet moved on from the war. As a kamikaze pilot, he fled his duty, instead pretending a fault had happened on his plane, so that he would not meet the fate of other pilots of his category. Throughout the film, he battles with this decision, citing it as an omen that has led to the goings-on in his life after the war. This also tied into the first time he sees Godzilla. Whilst other films spend time building up that reveal, to see the giant monster and the destruction it brings, this film takes a different route, showing Godzilla within the first 10 minutes, but with a scene that truly shows its scale, its furiosity. From the get-go, the camera stays with the people, very rarely showing the view from Godzilla, to truly show its size beside us, its weight and movement. As Godzilla moves around, we feel each and every step, people being trampled on or being grabbed by its huge mouth. As the monster destroys anything in sight, we see Koichi, ordered to his plane to shoot the monster. But as he enters the cockpit, he freezes, the size of what's in front of him fully put into perspective. Even with a 20mm gun aimed at the monster, it would do no damage, so Koichi flees only to be hit by debris and knocked unconscious. Everyone except one dead around him, the one survivor blaming him for the events of the prior night. It is in that short 10 minutes that the film hooks you, and after that the struggle of watching Koichi struggle through guilt, turmoil, rage, suicide, and more becomes so captivating. As someone who has watched only a handful of films based on the mythological giants that could inhabit our world, it has become more apparent in recent years these giants are no longer what they once were. Becoming the protagonists themselves, the world is now seen through their eyes. The destruction whilst being present feels small, the human drama always feeling like a B-plot. Now more than ever showing these giants as our heroes, fighting against a bigger threat, a product of an age where the fantasies of what-if battles were brought to life before us. This really being put into perspective, as the trailer that played before the movie was for Godzilla x Kong, The New Empire. The creatures in that film feeling minuscule to the world around them, the story being nothing more than a reason to see climactic fights. What -1 does so well though is bringing the theme of the genre back. Godzilla is not a hero in this film, nor a villain. Whilst the likes of Jaws preyed on its victims without meaning, Godzilla is more a force of nature, a nuclear accident that is now so unstoppable, it brings the whole world under fear, were it to ever be found out by them. Every time Godzilla appears on screen, you have that rush of adrenaline, of fear. When Godzilla uses its atomic breath, you feel that power, that destructive force. As the camera always shows us looking up at Godzilla, like a human, or looking down on it like a bird, it makes us feel tiny, makes us feel small, and that is where the magic lies. We feel the desperation as our characters try to come up with a plan. We feel the skepticism of every decision, however we feel the hope of every character who takes part on the mission to take Godzilla down. the heroic optimism of men who now have a reason to protect their homeland, to do right this time, to do it of their own volition. In the action, we see scenes of men coming back to duty, hesitant to put their lives at risk, always being the ones trodden on and used as fodder by the government. Now facing another near impossible to defeat threat, we see them deliberate with that thought before ultimately deciding to do it because someone has to do it. As we see men cheer, soldiers coming back together, and the younger characters pleading to join, it is all put into perspective. In this day and age, we're all too detached from the sacrifices of generations prior, all too separated from the world that came in the wake of the end of the Second World War. We live day to day merely taking for granted what millions gave up their lives for, the future they wanted now granted to us at their sacrifice. As a younger generation, there will always be some of us that seek that adventure to take part, to feel it necessary to go into a war, to fight. We understand the turmoil and plight of older generations, being tricked by the same lies and deceit again and again. Whilst only a part of this film, -1 encapsulates the perfect anti-war film. It carries us along, showing the perspective from both those veterans who are tied to the war and those young who are tied to war, seeking that bond and action that those only slightly older than them saw. All of this culminating in the line, "We leave the future to you," not just speaking to the characters of the film, but speaking to us as well. Whilst most of those who fought are now gone, while some were good and some were the devil incarnated, they all fought for the future, what they thought was the perfect future, for a prosperous world in their own eyes. To forget history is to repeat it, so I say to you all now, my brothers, my sisters, to forget the sacrifice for the future is to forget the very meaning of why we are here ourselves. To not acknowledge those victories and those defeats, those lessons, is only to doom us to see it happen again. At this point in time, now more than ever, the world needs that remembrance. So when we see these characters on screen, even though they are fictional, the thoughts and minds of those men and women at that time are no less true. So even just for a moment, look back at the past, at that sacrifice, at their plight, at the lessons they gave us and the world they entrusted. And even if it's only small, make your difference in this world so that their sacrifice is not in vain. When looking at films in general in this decade, it has been a ride of travesty, unnecessary spending, and political pandering. Films now more than ever are being used as open political messaging from both sides. As we see more and more streaming services pop up, more money being pumped into productions that can't turn a profit, and fully shot films never coming to the cinema near you, we ask what happened. Only a decade ago, none of this existed, so what went wrong? Whilst a lot of the blame has been put on Marvel and the creation of centralised universe films that are always being made just for the sequel, it can also be said it's a product of the world we live in today. Whilst 20 years ago the stars of Hollywood lived at the highest echelons of society, in the modern age they have been overtaken by influencers and streamers. Whilst there used to be 3 categories of film, the second category has now been eaten up by streaming services. That category being the place where actors could rise the ranks and being trusted with higher paying roles. This being where the likes of Leonardo DiCaprio and Tom Hanks went from known actors to be world famous. In this modern era, the same cannot be said. The emphasis now being placed on seeing characters within a story than the actors that get cast as them, well documented by actors who got their big roles as characters in major universes, but have since failed to land roles in equally paying films. Whilst most people watch -1 to see Godzilla, you can't help but be swept up by the actors you see. In a story that usually pushes the human element to the side in favour of massive set pieces, -1 manages to juggle that perfectly. With a run hour of 2, every scene feels needed, the pacing never seems too slow or too fast. The cinematography is masterful and the sound is gripping. Bombastic noises for each scene, Godzilla's presence truly comes to life. The soundtrack a cacophony of emotion that pulls you along like a string through sadness, pain, hope, longing, triumph and happiness. It is on par or even surpasses Ludwig Göransson's work on Oppenheimer. All on the budget of 15 million, -1 shows the power of what films with lower budgets can be, as long as the right creative team is involved, as long as story is placed first and politics is subtle, as long as the human element shines just as brightly as the monster they face. -1 stands at the pinnacle of what aspiring creators should aim for, and it is the first film in a long time that I wish didn't end so quickly. A film where I wished I could have seen the continuation of the characters' lives and what became of them, and that feeling is only reserved for films that truly make us feel.